We also read, if you go to verse 26, there's two sentences in that verse. Go to the second sentence. It says, "Then you and your household shall eat there in the presence of the Lord your God and rejoice." A tithe is a very personal thing. You should do it with your household. You should do it together. And if you go even further back, right, there's a lot of grace involved, because the first part of 26, after they've been instructed, look, if the place I choose for you to eat the tithe is too far away, exchange everything for silver, and then come to verse 26. Use the silver to buy whatever you like. Use it to buy whatever you like, all of those things. And then eat it with your household. Sometimes I don't think we recognize the grace that God grants to us in so many ways. There was an article this week I read on CNN that was titled "Millennials Leaving the Church in Droves, Study Finds." Now, it's not news, although it's a new study that suggested it's happening way faster than we thought. And of course, as the church, we need to respond way faster than we think, I think, at this point. But one of the comments in there, because of course they have to get extreme comments from both sides, was from the communications person for the Center for Inquiry, which is a secular advocacy group. And this person said, "It is really good news to see a whole generation of people who are making their own decisions about belief, religion, and spirituality." Now, I know the assumption that he's making behind that, but I don't agree with him that all of a sudden people are now making their own decisions as if they weren't before. But here's the thing. I think we sometimes mistake the grace of God for something else, which I think stands behind comments like this. Sometimes we mistake God's grace for a nuisance. Sometimes we mistake God's grace as a restriction of freedom. And so when or giving or whatever is mentioned, sometimes people hear that, oh, God just wants more of my money, or the church, worse, wants more of my money. Well, that's not at all what we're reading here. Look at the amount of grace that's involved here, and freedom, in fact, involved here. And you see that throughout the whole biblical picture, right? I've talked to people who look at the Garden of Eden story, and they say, man, God is so mean or mean-spirited because he kicked Adam and Eve out for breaking one rule. They just broke one rule. Isn't God a God of grace and mercy? Well, first of all, it was the only rule. Let's start there. And it was a pretty big thing to transgress. But the thing about it is, there's a ton of grace in God kicking Adam and Eve out of the garden. It actually is an act of grace. And here's why. There are two trees. The knowledge of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, which is what they ate from, but there's the tree of life. And God says, let's not let them eat from that or they're going to make it permanent. The breach in our relationship between us and humans will be permanent. Get them out of here so we can fix the relationship. That's an act of grace. And that's what the rest of the biblical story is God trying to fix the relationship. And it was our fault, not his. You see also throughout, and we covered this last week, we talked about Exodus 32, after the people have been released from bondage in Egypt, they're out in the desert, they end up worshiping idols, and God says, I'm through with these people, and Moses says, just have some mercy on them, have some compassion, and God says, I will. I will. There are all kinds of examples through Scripture where God's grace is illustrated when it wasn't deserved, which is sort of the deal with grace. And we sometimes see it wrongly. We see it as the opposite. We see it as restricting or a nuisance. God owns it all, is what you can read throughout Scripture. And he says, hey, give me 10%. Eat it in my presence. Eat it with your family. Choose the good stuff and eat it together. Do that. A tithe is not just personal, it's communal, we discover. We commune with God, we commune with family, we commune with friends, with those who don't have. We'll read that in just a moment. And Pastor J. Orr, a pastor of the last century, says the enjoyment of what we have is enhanced by sharing it with others. And I think he's absolutely right. And that's absolutely what God's giving us. He says, enjoy it with me, enjoy it with those you love. Be be together in giving to me. It should be an enjoyment, not something you dread. And importantly then, because of this gets back to the antenna story, I think. The people are supposed to enjoy this as they give. And sometimes we can destroy our own fun with the wrong attitude, destroy the enjoyment of something by seeing it wrongly. But we're supposed to give to God something worth giving. That's a very important point I think we see here. Give the best, give something you might enjoy in this case. They're going to eat it, it says. I've enjoyed the hospitality of many people in my years of ministry now. A lot of people are on the general bell curve of hospitality, okay to good. And then there are some of those people, I don't know if but they excel. They're in another category altogether. The rest of us are graded on a curve comparatively. They're just out there. And these are the kind of people who, when they say, come over for coffee, what that means is I baked 24 cookies last week and threw them in the freezer just in case an incident like this came up. And here's a tray of cheese and crackers, and also this is a dessert that's been in my family for generations I just whipped up this morning. That's coffee. Those are wonderful homes to go to, by the way. Give something worth giving. God does that with us. Giving is revealing about who we are, just like in those hospitality situations. It reveals a lot about who we are. It reveals a lot about what we love. It tells us if we recognize God as giving freedom or restricting freedom.